Peace be upon you all. And welcome to the Forgiveness Forum, where science and spirituality meet. I am Azza Karam, Secretary General of Religions for Peace, which is one of the oldest, largest, most representative, multi-religious global institution operating for the last 52 years. I happen to have the privilege of serving as one of the hosts of today's event. We are looking forward to hearing from our esteemed guests today, who are joining from around the world and speaking in multiple languages. Translation is available for all viewers. Please select your preference by choosing from the list under Translation at the bottom of your screen. Our speakers are also looking forward to hearing your questions and reactions. You may submit a question at any time using the Q&A function available on the Zoom toolbar. Before beginning, we will observe together a moment of shared silence. You may choose this moment to reflect on something important to you, to send a positive thought to loved ones or even to strangers. Please join me in observing this moment now. Thank you. Now, to launch our program, let me introduce my delightful co-host, Dr. Andrew Sarrazin, the president of the Templeton World Charity Foundation, with whom we are deeply honored and privileged to co-present this event today.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Karam. I'm Andrew Sarrazin, president of Templeton World Charity Foundation, and I'm so excited to hear from our incredible guests at this, what is the fourth Forgiveness Forum, where science and spirituality meet. Nearly 2 years ago, the Templeton World Charity Foundation launched the Forgiveness Forum series to convene a global conversation on the potential of forgiveness for personal growth and global healing. These virtual events have engaged what we consider to be the frontline workers of forgiveness, individuals who provide support, education, and counsel to their communities on why to consider forgiveness and how to practice it. Past events have engaged leaders and policymakers, mental health professionals, and educators from around the world. And I'm so excited today to continue the conversation with faith leaders drawn from all over the world. Forgiveness is, of course, a topic central to many of the world's religions. In Islam, forgiveness suggests alignment with Allah. In Judaism, acts of atonement are expected for wrongdoing. And in Christianity, forgiveness is unconditional. From a scientific perspective, for the past 20 years, the Templeton Philanthropies have been funding research on the fundamentals of forgiveness, as well as methods to practice it better. And for me, as a trained biomedical scientist, the results are just extraordinary. We know that by engaging in forgiveness, our physical health improves, our mental health improves, our relationships to one another improve, and importantly, our relationship to God improves. Today, we've partnered with Religions for Peace to explore forgiveness from two sides of the same coin, from a scientific and a spiritual perspective. We'll hear from a panel of experienced faith leaders representing 5 different religious traditions, followed by an exciting conversation between Krista Tippett, a journalist, host, and creator of the podcast On Being, and Reverend Nadia Bolz-Weber, a powerful speaker and advocate for forgiveness who has helped countless people through her 3 New York Times bestselling books, her podcast, and direct counseling. So thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome back to our co-host, the distinguished and wonderful Professor Karam, Secretary General of Religions for Peace. I'm also pleased to introduce Dr. Josef Boehle, the Director of the Peace Charter for Forgiveness and Reconciliation, to lead us into the next session.
Thank you very much. Dr. Saracen and Professor Karam, thank you for bringing us here today together. I'm honored to be a part of this conversation, and my name is Dr. Josef Boehle. I'm the director of the Peace Charter for Forgiveness and Reconciliation, the principal investigator of the Religion and Peace Building in International Relations Research Project at the University of Birmingham, UK, and a visiting scholar at the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies at Friedrich Schiller University, Jena. In this first segment of our event, I want to ask you a few questions to uncover why and how this partnership and event came to be and why it is so important. Let us start with the basic question of why we are here today. Why does each of your organizations care about forgiveness? Why have you convened this dynamic group we have with us today? Dear Andrew, could you please respond?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Boehle. And before I respond, I just want to thank you for your leadership in raising the awareness of the adoption of reconciliation and forgiveness. As you've heard, we're so excited to convene what we consider frontline workers of forgiveness, and you're definitely in that camp. For the Templeton World Charity Foundation, forgiveness is absolutely central to our overall mission, which is to fund innovations for human flourishing. And I don't know about you, but in the past 2 years, it seems like we've just been living from catastrophe to catastrophe, from pandemic to war to famine, economic challenges, what you might think of as kind of the four horsemen of the apocalypse in the modern world. And, we've lived through a once-in-a-century pandemic, currently struggling with the largest land war in 80 years in Europe, and experiencing the highest atmospheric CO2 levels in 14 million years. And so I think just who among us haven't had to recalibrate, inventory what we value, to look at what we surround ourselves with and why, to what makes life worth living. And so that's the central question that we're investigating. How can I flourish, not just merely survive? And so what's so amazing about forgiveness is that it's a tool and a strategy to help navigate challenging times. Flourishing isn't about wishful thinking or living in an idealized state. It's about dealing effectively with trauma, with hurt, with setbacks. And I think another reason this work on forgiveness is so important is that I think it's a fantastic example about how science and religion can work together productively. Increasingly we see that science and religion are framed as in conflict with each other. You'll see headlines reading, new scientific discovery challenges long-held religious dogma. And for me, that's incredibly shallow and misleading. Many of the world's religions contain so many basic truths about the human condition and our ultimate purpose. And science provides a deep and unrelenting methodology for breaking the world down into its component parts to tinker, investigate, and improve. And so for me, so excited because forgiveness combines the best of scientific insight and spiritual wisdom that can help with human flourishing. So thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And then the same question goes to Azza. Why does your organization care about forgiveness? And why do you look forward to this collaboration with the Templeton World Charity Foundation and, of course, with the whole network of Religions for Peace International? Azza, please.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And thank you, Andrew, for that answer as well. A couple of points that I think are worthy of bearing in mind. The first is that Religions for Peace is exactly that. It's different faith traditions coming together over the last half a century to work together to realize peace, which is beyond the absence of conflict. It is the whole of the spectrum of dignity, which cannot happen when we have a repository of anger, of hatred, of bitterness in our bodies and in our minds. And what the science tells us irrevocably, thanks to so much of what the Templeton have funded and supported and helped us see is that our bodies, our minds need to be rid of the toxins of anger and hatred and bitterness and pain. And therefore, if 8 out of 10 people in the world profess to a particular religion, which is the data that we have today, that means that every one of us, almost every one of us, has faith as the central spinal cord, the thing that holds us up. In situations, and I would add to the litany of the dark horses of the apocalypse, I would add one very important point as well, which is that we live in a moment and in times where there is so much untruths, so much competing truths, that it becomes absolutely imperative to focus on the dignity of our truths within ourselves. And this is where faiths have a very critical role to play. Every single faith tradition around the world, as we will hear from our amazing speakers today, every single faith tradition requires, demands, insists, supports, catalyzes, urges for a form of forgiveness, such that we can go beyond the toxins that keep piling on in our bodies and in our souls. And every single faith tradition provides a means of doing so. Just last month, Religions for Peace hosted in Tokyo one of its first multi-religious peace roundtable. The idea is to bring together faith leaders. And remember, when we say leaders, I do not only speak of the ordained religious leaders. I speak of those who serve, leadership as service. Faith leaders are those who serve their communities, inspired by their faith tradition. We convene these faith leaders from countries right now undergoing significant armed conflict. So we weren't waiting for before or after, but during a moments of conflict and armed conflict and crises, they came together even though they sit on opposite sides of a conflict, in order to hear from them and from them to hear from one another how it is that as they coexist in the height of conflict, they are capable, and indeed it is their imperative to forgive, to coexist in peace in the height of the conflict, which normally we don't look at. We only look at armed conflict as the pain that it genuinely is. But how is it that faith leaders actually, through their own work, through their own conviction, through their tireless service, are able to indeed bring about that forgiveness in the midst of the trauma? Today, we have a remarkable array of people. One of our indigenous leaders, grandfather Dominique Rankin, shared last year when we convened in Germany how he was taken away from his parents in Canada and forcefully placed in a school with other Native and Indigenous children, how he was abused as a child, and how his family suffered the trauma of his separation. And in spite of this, grandfather Dominique Rankin is a faith leader who is himself a walking, talking model of forgiveness. Our Christian young faith leader, Miss Ligia Matamoros, lives in Central America, an area of the world that continues to see forced migration and violence. She herself is a light of forgiveness and wisdom, the wisdom of forgiveness. Our Muslim leader, Imam Chitou from Benin in Africa, he lives in an area, in a part of the world that has suffered and continues to intense colonization, was left without infrastructure, and continues to struggle with poverty in spite of the richness and wealth of people and their faith. Rabbi Rick Jacobs, our Jewish leader and the moderator of the next panel, has worked tirelessly many years in this interfaith space to address anti-Semitism and the violence it has brought the Jewish community here in the United States and around the world. Our Hindu leader, Dr. Sadhviji Bhagavati Saraswati, has and continues to serve the mission of spiritual forgiveness in India and around the world. Let us take a moment for you too, Dr. Boehle, to share a bit about why forgiveness has been so central to your work and your leadership of all of us.
Well, over the last 25 years, my work and research was focused on religion, politics, and peace. Now, any longer engagement with questions of peace and sustainable peace building will come soon to the conclusion that for sustainable peace, it is important that people or conflicting groups or nations reconcile. Without reconciliation, without healing, most conflicts will soon erupt again, or any kind of peace agreements will fall apart. So reconciliation is central for sustainable peace building. Now, how does one come to reconciliation? Many would claim, and I would agree, that for reconciliation, forgiveness can play a very important role on the path to reconciliation. And now there are many, many initiatives, research projects, and organizations focusing on reconciliation and peace building, but comparatively speaking, still few organizations really try to understand deeper, reflect more, and try to raise awareness on the issue of forgiveness. So there are many local and national initiatives to advance forgiveness and reconciliation as part of post-conflict reconstruction and peace building. However, these national initiatives, organizations, and commissions are in general not focused on advancing these values and practices beyond their national contexts and spaces. There is therefore a substantial and timely need to further raise awareness, deepen understanding, and advance the public discourse concerning forgiveness, restorative justice, and reconciliation inside international agencies and institutions, as well as in the international public sphere, aiming to create and mainstream international norms and standards in response to these critical issues like forgiveness, reconciliation, and peace building. Now, I'm directing the Peace Charter for Forgiveness and Reconciliation, which aims to address these issues and these institutional and public challenges by working at local, national, and global levels. So whilst there are many, many organizations that do this work and have done for decades, I think there's still the need to further raise awareness for the specific issue of forgiveness as it relates to reconciliation and peace building. And the Peace Charter for Forgiveness and Reconciliation wants to contribute, especially in local, national, and global discourses. Lastly, I just want to mention the initiator and co-convener of the Peace Charter for Forgiveness and Reconciliation, who is also a co-president of Religions for Peace International, Bhai Sahib Mohinder Singh. He played a core role really in starting this initiative towards a better understanding of forgiveness, reconciliation, and peace. So this is a very brief introduction. If anyone wants to learn more about the Peace Charter, please go to the website of the Peace Charter at charterforforgiveness.org. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And now I think we go back to Andrew. And Andrew, this question is for you. Andrew, there's an abundant amount of material across religious traditions calling for forgiveness. The case has been made from the perspective of the truly faithful. With that in mind, why is it important for faith leaders to also consider and incorporate science into their practice? Please, Andrew.
Well, thank you, Dr. Boehle and Professor Karam. I'm so looking forward to the panel, and I don't want to take up precious time from really the amazing stories of the individuals that are about to share. I think I want to say three major things about the science of forgiveness. And the first is, sometimes it's been said that that the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. That faith includes noticing the mess of life, the emptiness and discomfort, and letting it be there until the light returns. And I would say that there's a deep similarity in the aims, or in the way that science works, actually, although by different means, by being a process of being less wrong. And it's not about being absolutely certain. But in the case of forgiveness, we've made some fairly amazing headway in the past 20 years to understand forgiveness at a granular and practical level. The first thing is that forgiveness is really hard. And anybody that's thought about this and practiced this knows this. It's difficult because it's just completely natural for us to seek revenge after being hurt. It serves, in other words, an evolutionary purpose. Tit for tat, an eye for an eye. It's a biological mechanism that can enforce discipline, revenges, enforce discipline in groups and prevent future transgressions. And so, to some extent, that kind of cycle of revenge works until it doesn't. But forgiveness is miraculous in that sense, because it is totally different. It helps human beings cooperate and overcome these cycles of revenge and shame and guilt, to form ever larger societies able to coordinate and progress, and therefore escape the cycles of retribution. So researchers define forgiveness as a reduction in vengeful thoughts and feelings that is accompanied by a simultaneous increase in positive thoughts, feelings, and emotions towards the offending person. And so when you're forgiving, in a biological sense, you're trying to override these very deep-seated desires that have really ancient evolutionary origins. It's a process that takes time because of that. It's not always linear. There's uncertainty and doubt to overcome. But I think research is showing at least some of the sort of fundamentals or sort of dimensions of forgiveness, and really studies have shown us that really to fully benefit from the practice, it requires a twofold approach. So the first is what you might call decisional forgiveness. A person makes a commitment to forgive. You write that commitment down, say it out loud, tell a friend about it. This targets the cognitive and rational faculties of the brain. The second step, however, involves thinking about what it would look like and feel like to forgive. I love Professor Karam when she was talking about that sort of toxins that are in our bodies because of trauma, and that's exactly right. So the second step involves visualization, imagination, storytelling, spoken words, the act of giving a physical gift. And so this is all about getting the rest of the body to follow on from the decision that's made in the first step. And it's often accompanied by the most powerful sense of release and sense of peace. So just in simple terms, forgiveness involves the head and the heart, engages the whole person, just like how science and faith appeal to different but integral parts of our lived experience.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm being told that we have more or less run out of time, but just maybe in 1 minute only, Azza, one thought about why do you think that the engagement between religious leaders and science is important? But 1 minute only, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'll speak really quickly. So, in my humble opinion, faith is the science of love. Let me say that one more time. Faith is the science of love. If science is the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the study of the structure and behavior of physical and natural world through observation and experiment, then faith is the science of love. And love, as we've heard and as we've seen from the scientific practices and experiments, is at the heart of forgiveness. That's it.
Thank you so much, Professor Azza Karam and Dr. Andrew Sarrazin, for your very valuable contributions. And I will hand over now to Rabbi Rick Jacobs for the next section of this Forgiveness Forum. Thank you very much.